Detours. Brought to you by Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. In this year's attempt to qualify for the Canadian Paralympic team in para-canoe, rower Ben Brown fell just short of his goal. After making adjustments to his technique and his boat, Brown has set his sights on the 2028 Paralympics in Los Angeles. Hey, Ben, I noticed that you've had a lot of sporting under your belt. There's many sports you've tried, some you've been successful in, and others you've passed up on in a short period of time. But you played basketball, you played sled hockey or para hockey. You raced as a T53 in the 1, the 2, the 400 meters. All these established sports in the adaptive sporting world, and yet you choose to go off to para canoeing or para rowing. Why?
Well, after not making both Rio and Tokyo, me and my former track coach, Julie Albert, were having our annual meeting of how things went and what we need to do to move forward. And he said, we sat down and okay, during this Paralympic cycle of Tokyo, where did I improve, and did I really improve at the level I should have? And we realized I hit a plateau. And he said for the last 3 weeks, I was, other than taking my 2-week break, he thought of it even when I was in Quebec trying to get a last chance at Tokyo. And also, we could have booked our tickets early for Kobe 2022. And that didn't happen. And he was looking into para-canoe because in Nova Scotia, one of our biggest sports for sending people to the Olympics is canoe kayak. And there's a lot of funding behind also that helps. And there's, I think it's 11 or 12 clubs in the province. And for the most part, there's always people to train with. Because one of the things is when I was in track and road racing was I would have the odd training partner, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to keep up. And the only time I got training partners essentially was when I'd go to a track meet early, and get there early, train with other people, or during national team training camps. And especially where I was at the end of my career focusing on the 4 and the 8, not so much in the 4 is that crucial, but in the 800 and above, as you know, if you're training by yourself, you can only make it work for so long because you don't get that drafting practice, you don't get to work on your tactics. You're essentially just training to make sure you can, do the 2 laps or the 3 3/4 or the 11 or 12 and a half or whatever it is for the 5,000. That's great. But if you don't have anyone to work with, it makes, you're not going to exactly get the times you need to qualify for the big games. And Yulia asked me, when we were talking about this, is what's your end goal? And I said, make the Paralympics and get a gold medal and get a world record. And he said, that's what I thought, but you're not going to do it in track. You're going to do it in a boat. And I looked at him you realize I can't swim, right? He's like, yeah, just throw in a life jacket and away we go. So we got lined up with our Canadian Sports Institute to get me set up with my provincial sport organization for canoe kayak. I hopped in a Nello Viper with pontoons just to try kayak. And my former track paddling coach, he was there. And he said, honestly, you're going to be better off in a canoe. So I did still try the kayak a bit, and then I realized that, as we were talking, where World Championships was less than a year away, and it was going to be essentially in my backyard, and I knew, wasn't just thinking World Championships, I was thinking Paralympics long term, and I knew where balance is an issue for me being a T5 or a T53. Being in a VA canoe with the outrigger would be much better suited for me. And
hey, Ben, really quick, let me jump in there because I want to talk about the equipment. I've seen pictures of it, and I was thinking about that outrigger. I can see you sit in one side, and just off to your right, maybe 3 feet away, is the outrigger. So is that anything that's specially adapted for you, to compensate for being an adaptive athlete, or is that the way anybody would participate in a sport like this?
So the VA canoes are OC1s, those, they were invented in 600 AD, by the Hawaiians, Tahitians, Polynesians, so they could paddle the South Pacific. And then people without disabilities race them out in the ocean, and they'll do like a 20-mile race out in the ocean with these things. And when the sport of paracanoe became part of the International Canoe Federation, there was the Paralympic style kayaks. So they're just a little wider than the Olympic stream. Like Olympic stream kayak goes down to like 30, I think it's 37 centimeters, whereas the Paralympic one, the smallest you're allowed to use is a 47, and it can go up to like 60 centimeters. Well, for canoe, Olympic canoe, you're on one knee. So obviously, as paras, we're not getting on one knee. We have to sit down. And they opted to use these VAWs because with the outrigger, the boat stays upright. So without the outrigger, the boat will literally fall. So when I'm hauling my boat around, like to go paddle with at a different lake or go to a regatta or whatever, or take it to Florida, for example, when that boat goes on the roof, it does tilt. But as soon as you slap the outrigger on, then the boat stays upright, unless I lean to the left. Or if you're a left-handed paddler, if you lean to the right, the boat will tip. So essentially that keeps your boat upright depending on what side you paddle, predominantly.
Ben, let's talk about the race. Every race is a race, whether it's in a racing chair or you're running or you're in a canoe. So you got to start, you got a base portion, the middle portion, and you have a finish. What are your strong points and what are your weak points? And what is it that you think you need to focus on at this point?
My start was kind of weak at first, then it got strong, and then it got weak again. And we've been really working on that for the last, I'd say close to 6 weeks, and it's gotten much better. We're down to the first 10 meters, getting it down to 5.5 strokes. Because one thing that we do when we go to national regattas is Canoe Kayak Canada has these little GPS units, and they'll throw it on the back of the boat, and it'll tell us our whole speed curve and our stroke rate, and let us know how long every 10-meter split is. Break it down that much. I'd say once I get the boat moving, then getting up to top speed, I get up to my top speed between 10 and 15 seconds, and I can maintain that for quite a while as long as I don't have to steer too much. And then I would say my finish usually can be a bit of my strong point, depending on how much lactic acid I'm burning, because a 200-meter race takes me I'd say almost what the opening 600 meter of my 800 takes on the track.
So is 200 meters, is that a status quo race? Is that a given distance that you've chosen to race, or is that the race?
That's the race for paracanoe internationally. So when I'm racing at home at local regattas, I can get a 500 just to mix things up so it doesn't get mundane, or I can do what they call a distance regatta, and everyone does that. So it's a 2,000 meter and a 6,000 meter, or we can do canoe marathons, and that's actually international as well. And a canoe marathon on the Olympic stream starts at 15K and can go up, like I say, to sometimes 32. ICF, when they do their para one, and I'm going to do it in 2026 because I found out it's in Sarasota. So it's with canoe marathon, it's not an Olympic Paralympic sport, so we have to fund that trip ourselves. And Sarasota is not exactly overly expensive for me to. One, I can drive. I don't have to fly. I don't have to rent a boat. I can prepare 3 hours away from Sarasota, so that kind of thing. And I noticed the last 2 years since paracanoe's been put into the canoe marathon world champs, depending on your classification, it could be, in my case, being a VL1, 8 kilometers, 5 miles, or it can go up to 12 kilometers. I mean, I don't mind doing 12 kilometers. I've done it, multiple times. My fastest 12K paddle I've done is under 90 minutes. So that's the other thing is my fastest 10K is not much, it's a few minutes faster than Marcel's marathon world record.
Wow. So that being said, Ben, you having done several different sports, how demanding is paracanoeing compared to, say, racing?
Paracanoe is a lot more demanding, to be honest. One thing is, before the global inflation rate kicked off right before COVID ended, my grocery bill went up $200 each month because I need more food. If I'm not in the boat, I'm in the weight room, and during the winter, I'm playing sledge hockey, I'm lifting weights, I'm swimming, getting on a rowing erg that's modified to work on the canoe stroke. And that's the thing is actually my former my current coach, he used to be part of the board for Cycling Nova Scotia, and he thinks he can get his hands on or he's pretty confident he can get his hands on a hand cycle for me. So if I have some spare time during a weekend on a Saturday and I'm not gassed out from, because typically my Saturday morning paddles typically tend to be, I don't want to do anything on the rest of the day. That's how hard they are, because that's the point. So then we take Saturday and Sunday off, the rest of it. I just get some buddies that, ride bikes and hop in a hand bike, because I still got my helmet, and I just go ride a hand bike around the road just for, some extra cardio, because that's the other thing, Bob, is our sport. Like, if you live in a northern climate, when lakes freeze, you can't really get out on the water. So you have to figure out how to keep that cardio base up. Now, where I do
all the time.
Yeah. Where my 200, it's more of a pure, this is the other thing. The Vaz are way harder to steer than a racing chair. I tell people there's 3 things I miss about, not about wheelchair racing. 1 is the speed. 2 is my friends that I still am in contact with. And 3 is steering the race chair was a lot easier to learn than steering a boat. Because if wind picks up, it just wants to go wherever it's going to go.
We'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Sports and Spokes Magazine. For nearly 50 years, they've produced stories on iconic athletes performing at the top of their game, given generational coverage of sports dating back to the 1970s, and they've shown the way with exciting and timeless magazine cover shots. To stay on top of all the latest news from the world of high-performance adaptive sports, go to sportsandspokes.com. Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. All right, Ben. So, lastly, just to give people an idea, if someone were looking to get involved in para-canoeing or rowing as an adaptive sport, and this is what they want to dedicate themselves to, tell them why they would want to do it. What is it that you enjoy about it, and what does the sport bring to the table?
For me, it gave me at least another new lease on life, Bob, because like I say, I think I said it to a couple of friends. I just dropped off a roller to a private school to give them a roller for the province for wheelchair racing. Because again, I have stuff I just need to get rid of. Most of it I sold except for the frame, because I can't fit it anymore. But with para-canoe, I just found being on the lake is very peaceful and calming. Yes, the competition part can be stressful like track is, but I don't find it as stressful as track is. Now, mind you, the 200 meters, much like the 100 meter on the track, there's not really much room for error. But I found the other thing is, as much as I love wheelchair racing and I like sticking to a strict diet, I found with wheelchair racing, because you got to it's not saying you don't have to fit into your canoe or kayak, but I found with the race chairs, and this, you pretty much have to. That chair is built custom to you. So there's almost no wiggle room to, not saying you can't go with your friends and have, a meal that is not athlete friendly, but you're pretty much stuck to the same diet and the same foods year round, because if you cheat a little bit here and there, you don't fit in the chair. So it kind of allows you
get that fluctuation. I know. So, hey, man, I want to say that I'm really impressed by what it is that you're doing right now. It's great that you're breaking into a new forefront, and I know you're a little disappointed that you didn't get the trip to Paris. But good luck as you're moving forward. I know 2028 is definitely on the horizon, and I suspect you'll do quite well.
Oh, thanks, Bob. And I knew Paris wasn't going to happen when I started, because when I first started, my category VL1 only had 6 athletes internationally, and we needed a minimum of 10 so we could actually have heats. And that's kind of the weird thing coming from track is, I don't want to knock the IPC, but as you know, wheelchair racing, they're trying to go make the races straight finals. But with my sport, they want a heat and a semi and a final. And I'm okay, thanks for making. I like the fact that you want our sport to grow, but why are you doing this to an established sport? Because from a spectator standpoint, I don't want to see a straight final. I don't know about you guys. I want to see Marcel have to, or Brent or Daniel, like actually, or Tatiana or Manuela or Catherine or Austin all have to, at least do one race before the final. Like, that's kind of the
semi.
Yeah, that's the point, to have the best of the best. And also, I didn't make Worlds this year. It was fine, but I just found out, in June, and I got one more crack. I'm this close to doing it, is we have Para-Pan Am championships. It's not part of the Para-Pan Am games. It's just something that COPAC puts on, and that'll be in Uruguay in November. So I have my national championships at the end of August in just outside of Niagara Falls, and we're on the actually last Saturday's regatta. I missed it by 0.05 of a second. We had a substantial headwind. My coach is like, yep, as long as you do what you just did and get better with your technique, you're hitting the standard no problem, and if anything, you'll smoke it. And I'm like, yep, perfect, thank you.